And so the kind of space we're in, I think, as researchers, I think we have this really great opportunity to address the SDGs and actually use the SDGs as a framework to really understand sustainable development. And we have to, and so, and we're in this point where we can really start using our research to guide policy instead of just using existing policy to justify the work we're already doing. And so I think the first key point is that this is really an unprecedented opportunity to understand and help shape socio-ecological systems, okay? Because now, arguably, sustainable development has now been defined, right? And that's been a huge issue in sustainability research for decades. What does sustainability mean? Arguably, now we have a definition among all the 169 targets in the SDGs, okay? We also have those theories of change that I brought up, those two strategic sustainability frameworks. And you can start to address these really kind of profound questions in sustainability, both from positive research lens, so like what goals can we actually achieve together and under what conditions, as well as more normative questions of research. So what goals should be prioritized? How should institutions be reorganized to meet the goals? And so what I'm proposing is you actually tie in the specific frameworks with the specific SDGs as well. And so you can actually get a path to a destination. So for the Strategic Sustainable Development Framework, which operates from that kind of backcasting from future sustainable development priorities, you can set the actual SDG targets as those priorities. And you can use the Sustainable Transition Management Framework. You can fit in the SDGs here. And so for the strategic policy arena, that really big, broad, high-level analysis, which is abstract and at systems level, you can start doing that SDG target interlinkage assessment, can look at different policy possibilities. At the tactical level, that medium level, it's again more institutional level. You can start looking at how you reorganize institutions to support the SDGs. And at the operational level, which is again looking at projects and kind of concrete action, you can evaluate different interventions and scenarios. And so kind of putting these together, you can really get a path to a destination. I think that this would be really important for research to actually aid policy. And so I'll give you some examples of some work I'm doing now, which is trying to do some of that. So So the first example is really looking at this strategic sustainable development using the SDGs. So using the SDGs as that desired future we're going to backcast from, and then starting to think about how do we actually get there. I have a paper in review right now looking at where we are right now is we're in a world with climate change, right? And again, I work with most ocean areas, so we're looking at the different ocean ecosystem services. If you understand how climate change is affecting oceanic ecosystem services, what are the consequences across the SDGs, okay? Because we're not operating from kind of a static point. We're operating under a changing ocean. And so climate change is gonna have largely negative, so the reds are all kind of negative impacts across the SDGs. Climate change is gonna have largely negative impacts across them. But there's two SDGs which are the least negatively impacted, and that's SDG 7, which is about clean energy systems, SDG 12, which is about responsible consumption and production practices. So if these are the least negatively impacted, they can also act as important entry points to start addressing the SDGs. So it could be the case that strategically you might want to start with looking at these. And the nice thing is that these two goals are actually, they're a means to address a lot of the goals across the other SDGs. So that can be a really interesting and good strategic starting point to starting to address the SDGs. Working with the other framework, the Sustainable Transition Management Framework. Remember those different policy arenas. So the strategic policy arena is really about exploring the kind of socio-ecological relationships. The middle one, the tactical policy arena, is really about determining institutional ecosystem needed to support policy. And the bottom one, the operational policy arena, is really about exploring management actions. So I'm starting to use this kind of framework as well for another series of projects. And one of them, I'm working with the APRU, the Association for Pacific Rim Universities, looking at sustainability across the Pacific Ocean for sustainable oceans. I don't have data yet to show you, but can kind of talk you through how we're looking at this. So if you can understand at a country, if what we're trying to do is at a country level across the Pacific, understand the co-benefits or synergies and trade-offs among the different SDGs as they relate to the ocean. So not looking at how important the ocean is to everything else, but looking at everything else as they support the ocean at a country level. Then you can potentially get different management strategies or policy strategies needed to support sustainable oceans. And so they can be, I've just kind of hypothesized 3 potential strategies here. One would be about environmental conservation to support sustainable oceans. Some countries, this might be the limiting factor. Some countries, it might be more economic development to support sustainable ocean development. In some countries, it might be institutional reform that might be needed. So it's really identifying kind of the key aspects across the SDGs needed to actually achieve sustainable oceans. And once you do that, once you have that, you can start looking at the institutions needed to actually support progress on these goals and then what it means. Like I think in order to really do a good job on this kind of integrated research, you have to really think in an integrated sense. And I've started applying this. I actually went to the country of Aruba. It's a small Caribbean island last year, and started to apply this work there. And so the first level, that whole strategic policy arena, starting to look like this. So if we can understand, so these are all the different SDG goals. These are the different targets among them. And then we're linking all the different targets to the ocean targets, okay? So what are the different SDGs that are supporting the various ocean targets? You can look at it by different types of co-benefits or synergies as well as trade-offs, okay? And so the size of the goal here kind of represents the number of linkages. And so you have the most linkages coming from actually sustainable economies, climate change action, conserving land ecosystems, and international cooperation come out as very, very strong in supporting the oceans throughout Aruba. Okay, so if we first understand that in terms of like what are the main sustainable development areas needed to support sustainable oceans, you can start looking at the tactical scale or the institutional analysis. And so this is a network analysis looking at these kind of light blues are the different SDG ocean targets, the main SDG ocean targets. And these different colors here are different institutions within the Aruban government. So Aruba is a nice case study because I could actually look at every single government ministry and government institution and see how they're related to the various targets under the oceans goal and the sustainable development goals. And so I can map out so if these institutions here are all needed for marine pollution, presumably they would all be communicating with each other, assuming that there's perfect communication among all the institutions that are working towards these various targets. You can put together this kind of institutional map. And the most central institution here is for the Department of Environment, right? So this is just assuming that they're just working directly with specific targets. And it makes sense that their Department of Environment would be kind of this central node in this ecosystem of institutions because they're responsible for most environmental issues. However, if you start looking at taking into account the different synergies, the co-benefits and the different trade-offs and actually regulating those to help ensure that you're actually achieving the SDGs, the institutional ecosystem looks something like this, where it's not actually the Department of Environment that is the central node that's communicating and integrating work across all the institutions. It's the social and economic council that's most important and the greatest linker across the institutions to achieve the ocean targets. So you can start looking at, okay, who are the major players and who should the major players be to help ensure that we get sustainability in this goal. And so, yeah, this is another project that I'm almost ready to submit, but it just showcases how research can go so much more than what we're doing right now. It can be really tied to specific policy areas. And so just to kind of wrap up, what I'm calling for is we need to really think, at the research community really has to think about how to connect the path to destination. So we really need to think about strategic theories of change or strategic theoretical frameworks, linking them to the SDGs. And research on the SDGs really needs to clearly contribute to policy guidance. It can't just be about using the SDGs to support the work you're already doing or to show how important the work you're already doing is. So yeah, as I said, it really needs to, I think it would really help to connect with theoretical frameworks like this. So with that, I'll just end and just thank the institute that I work for, the Nereus program, which is actually funded by the Nippon Foundation. And yeah, it's a really great institution that's really given me a lot of support. So I'd like to just thank them, and thank you all for having me.